John, we got another big week here.
Is that perhaps the biggest week
of the year?
Giant. Of all 52, this is top 2.
But when you consider the guests that we have, this may be the biggest week of all time for this show.
Bumps it up.
Let's just be clear about that.
Nah. For sure. Wait, you might know him, our guest, from his Twitter hot takes.
Ooh.
You may.
Sorry if you do.
Or his X hot takes for everybody, before the Elon folks yell at me. Can we introduce?
Please do.
The guest of guests?
Mm-hmm.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Quinn Nelson.
The only person that we could have had this week.
Thank you. I'm flattered.
It was Quinn or nobody. It was either no show this week.
Right.
Wow.
Yes. If Quinn can't make it, we're canceling. That's
good
how big this
Good
week
thing
is.
I wasn't busy, huh? Yeah.
And we mean canceling the show entirely going forward. Just like we're done with this
just
podcast.
no more episodes.
It's out. Yeah, we're done.
Yeah. So we're glad you made it. WWDC just happened. Obviously, I'm thinking I need to know what Quinn has to say about all this. And so I'm so happy that you were able to make it here.
Yes. And I got a bunch of EV and Rivian questions. And Cybertruck questions for that matter.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh, I didn't.
Let's just jump in because there's a lot to talk about this week. Obviously, with WWDC plus the EV stuff. So let's start with WWDC, and I want to go to you, John. I want to go to you first.
Okay.
I want to go to you first. Obviously, a lot of expectations, a lot of hype.
Yes.
A lot of rumor and innuendo.
There were. I feel like every year WWDC for new software, it's like you're holding an umbrella and like today's the day it's gonna rain, and then it doesn't rain. But one day, it's gonna rain, and you're gonna be right. And WWDC was like my rain day.
It was raining.
Like we finally got most of it. Right.
Right.
We can move icons around, which great. A little bit of customization, which is nice. Siri is no longer going to tell us what you found on the web, and nothing else. Hopefully, you don't have to hear every few minutes. I think, and all jokes aside, I think this is a really big step for Apple. I think when we see the full iOS 18 in its full form, which looks like it won't be till 18.1 or .2 sometime in 2025, when the full feature set hits, I think we'll have a very compelling AI play from Apple. And we've been sort of waiting for them to wade into those waters. I don't think it was without controversy. I think the ChatGPT stuff certainly merits a discussion. For a while, I put out a post. I couldn't figure out if Apple was paying ChatGPT or ChatGPT was paying Apple. Turns out, Apple does it for exposure, and Microsoft is a chump.
Oh, Tim Cook is ruthless.
Oh my God. For those who don't know, Microsoft paid, I don't remember, billions of dollars to ChatGPT, and Apple just did it for it's like those emails that we all get. We're like, oh, it's great exposure for your channel. And ChatGPT was like, yeah, 100%.
Microsoft is an investor, though, right? Like, they invested. Whereas it's just, when people make fun of Tim Cook, it's so funny. It's like, this is the guy that you're making fun of. Like, who else? I can't imagine. We're going to build your feature and use your servers to process, roughly, I guess it's not a billion people because not all phones are going to support this, but a lot. You're going to have a bigger influx than you've had likely from Windows through this. Yeah. We're just giving you exposure in return.
Listen, everybody evaluates Tim Cook based on product releases. One's evaluating him based on stock market performance, which the past 5 years is up over 350%. So, dude's doing all right.
Incredible. Wait, what did you think as an overall, before we jump into each individual thing, as an overall when watching WWDC? It starts, it ends. What are you feeling?
Oh, I think it was amazing. I think even without all of the Apple Intelligence stuff, they could have just ended it after the first hour and we would have been like, that was a good WWDC.
Yeah, I agree.
And then the whole Apple Intelligence stuff just augmented that even further. So the changes to the OSs, I think, are awesome. Like John mentioned, being able to move your icons around, home screen customization, changes to Control Center, changes to the Settings app, changes to the Photos app. I mean, a lot of the kind of sticking points that have been increasingly frustrating over the years of having not changed got big changes. And then all the stuff on top of that. It was a good, it rained, man. It rained.
Yeah. It didn't rain. What about iPadOS? It's still kind of the bigification of iOS. And I referenced your video where you're trying to run 2 instances of the app at the same time. Mm-hmm. And it was like, you can do everything on it, but you got to change everything that you know how to do.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I think a lot of people are misunderstanding is you keep seeing people that are like, you just want the iPad to be like the Mac. No, I don't. I don't want the iPad to be like the Mac at all. I just want it to be more powerful and capable than it is. They get so close, but there's just been a few sticking points. Like the file management system has always been a little bit problematic. Cross app sharing and multitasking has always been a bit problematic. And this was another year that they kind of just kicked the can down the road a little bit. They introduced the new little menu type thingy that seems cool. The more that I think about it, the more I'm not sure it's actually a good idea, because it kind of gets rid of that bottom bar that we're used to in apps where there's a little glyph and then the name. The glyphs are gone. So it's all just words up at the top of an app now, which isn't instantly intuitive about what's up there in each specific app. And then there's no cascading menus or anything. It's basically like we took the tabs at the bottom. Now they're up in the top in a little floating bar that can change and you can modify it. But it's not... It didn't seem like, oh, this is what I wanted. And nobody was really asking for that particularly. It's a nice feature, but it's a thing that, again, adds complexity to iOS or to iPadOS. This is a pro feature that they're adding, but it was just one that nobody really felt like was needed. The stuff that's been, slowly gnawing at the wound is just still not fixed. But
I still feel like we're waiting for a real iPadOS, and what we have is iOS iPad edition. Still?
This is, I think this year of any year in the past was confirmation of that, because the feature that Quinn just talked about, that new tab bar, that is literally the only iPad feature that they announced. So in other words, we're going to talk about the calculator.
The calculator,
the calculator, but the calculator works on iOS.
It does.
So it just doesn't have pencil support.
Right.
But the only iPad exclusive that I can remember was that tab bar. That's it. Just navigation, just a new way to navigate. Everything else is something you can do on your iPhone that we just also can do on the iPad now. I felt like, I don't know, after the whole M4 thing, I think a lot of us had hopes like, okay, what's coming next? You're going to, they're telling us the first part of the story here, and the second part has to come at WWDC.
Yep.
And we have a new tab bar navigation for you.
Yeah,
Enjoy.
It's frustrating because it's so close. It's so good. And the iPad Pro is the perfect computer for so many people, but it could grab so many more people with just like 10% more work. We're not talking add Mac OS. We're not talking, no, none of that stuff. Just give us like a couple little basic nuggets that we've needed for years and years and years, but didn't get it. So I guess the slogan can be iPadOS, maybe next year.
Sure.
Every year.
We're still holding the umbrella for iPad.
Let's go over to visonOS real quick, because I feel like a lot of people
that's a quick one
missed. Well, here's the thing. So Apple just kind of breezed through this one. They talked about a couple things and they moved on, right? There's a lot of things in the beta that they didn't mention that make visonOS so much better than they kind of let on. It felt like, hey, we're just kind of closing, fixing a few bugs and closing a few loops that we didn't close when we released it. But it almost feels like I almost want to say a different device, but it's not. I wouldn't go that far. But it feels just so much better. Like it's almost the most substantial, at least from all the betas. It's almost the most substantial change, because a lot of this stuff that we talked about today isn't in the betas yet.
How does spatializing non-spatial photos look?
My God. Quinn, you talk about it.
I looked at photos from me when I was a kid in the 90s. A lot of people misconstrued this and thought, oh, well, Apple's been gathering depth data when you take a picture for years. No. This isn't just on iPhone photos. This is on any photo from anywhere, from old cameras, from the web, whatever. It will turn them in, give you spatial depth. And I converted probably 150 photos, and I had one where I was like, that looks a little weird. There are instances in which it's more convincing than in other instances. If you have a photo that's like perfectly in focus, so it's there's not much depth or bokeh.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird because like it gives you artificial depth, but then you can focus on stuff and everything remains in focus. That's a little strange. But if there's any natural bokeh, it's amazing. The thing that blew me away was when you are close to a subject, or when your subject is close to an object or a background, it actually casts a drop shadow, which is insane. So it provides depth. Try it, Andrew. It's nutty. So there's a picture of me. Again? There's a picture of me in front of a tree when I'm a kid, and I'm like maybe 2 feet in front of the tree. There's a little bit of natural bokeh, but not much. It not only gives you the 3D effect, but it actually draws a shadow behind me as the subject in between the layers. And so I'm like, I'm there. You don't get the parallax effect of being able to look left and right because it's still just one single, camera shot. But you do get that weird kind of depth, and you can actually walk closer to the photo, and it like changes the field of view. It's wildly cool. It was super neat. And there's so many other, like Andrew said, little tiny changes that are really big in VisionOS. Like the new control center gesture is so much better than the old way of having to look up and tap. The taps are way more precise. I feel like I can tap like, and it's just like, it gets it every time. What else is new? Oh, the hand tracking now is done at 120 hertz rather than 60. So when you're moving windows,
I think it went from 30 to 90.
30 to 90. Okay, there you go. Yeah. So 30 to 90. Anyway, it's way better. So before, like, when your head was in the content, it was very smooth. But as soon as you would start to drag something, it was kind of like it would redraw a little bit. Now it's like buttery smooth. It's really impressive. VisionOS 2 is amazing. They should just release it today, too, because it's also really stable.
It's so good, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to iOS. So for me, I was so happy with, first of all, the customization stuff. I don't know how impressed you guys were. I feel like when I turn my phone on, the first thing I do, if the app I'm looking for isn't on my main home screen, is I just swipe down into Spotlight, type what I'm looking for, and just jump right in. So
100 out of 100 times.
I don't care. I don't care that I can put. I genuinely don't care. I don't care the colors. I don't want to make it. I want to make it more confusing for myself. Everything's the same color.
But you have choice. If you don't care, then leave it.
True. You're right. You have choice.
But if you want to make it look horrendous, you have that option.
Choice. Fair enough. You're right, John. I am a big fan of choice. I'm glad it's there for others. But iPhone mirroring.
That's cool.
This feels like a way to, like, when Apple released Apple Silicon, they were like, hey, all your iPad apps are going to be able to run on these computers. And then it seems like very quickly and promptly, so many developers went in and just unchecked that box, right? Now, you want an Instagram app on your Mac? Great. Just mirror my phone is going to be mirrored to my Mac, just right there in the corner of my screen 24/7. I don't see any reason to have to pick up my phone while I'm at my computer ever again. I'm so excited. You can drag and drop between them and everything. Like, that was my killer feature for iOS for sure.
Agree. I think it's very cool. One thing that did make me laugh was, I think it was in John Gruber's The Talk Show, Craig Federighi was saying, I use continuity camera all the time, so my phone is often on top of my display. And so this has been amazing for me because I can just leave it there. And the whole time he was saying this, I'm like, true, that is amazing. But also, why don't you guys just make a display with a good camera?
That's the big one, right?
Yeah. No, it's cool. And I'll use it too. And there are so many apps that, like Andrew mentioned, developers were just like, nah, we're not letting you run that on the Mac. And now Apple's like, fine, you can just run your whole iPhone on the Mac. And so it's great.
That's so good.
I'm gonna install Sequoia, I think, tonight and give it a shot.
I have not tried it.
You're not scared?
I'm less scared of the macOS updates. Those are usually generally, at least if you're not editing inside of them.
True.
Then
that's always been my downfall.
If you're doing any editing, you don't. Can I switch gears? Literally.
Where we switching gears to?
Oh,
I can talk some cars with Quinn.
We didn't even finish.
All right, fine.
This guy wants to switch over to cars.
Fine, finish it. I got so many Quinn questions.
We're going to. I mean, you just said. Okay, first of all, we're getting RCS. You excited? RCS?
Is that functional? Is that functional in their current betas?
I don't think so, because carriers have to adopt it, as far as I'm aware.
I don't
know.
Can I say, understated, I thought, was iMessage via satellite.
Yeah, that's cool.
Like, did not see that coming, and even SMS via satellite. We've all been in an area where we don't get cell service. That's huge. Huge.
That is huge, and it's free for at least for now. I feel like this is kind of the point where they're going to start adding satellite features that they may start charging for at some point.
I agree. Like you think now would have been time to do it, don't you think? Like, I think that what would have made sense to me is like, hey, this emergency. I still think that emergency is going to be free forever, just because that's the type of thing that you. So I expected when they started talking about it, I'm like, okay, they're going to say emergency is free for everyone, and this is part of an iCloud Plus plan or whatever. But then they didn't. So it seems hard to give this for free and then be like, now give us money. So maybe this will also just be free forever.
I think it's the first taste is free. You get used to it.
I don't know how satellites
get
work,
you on
but
the added end.
my guess is next year they add calling and then text and calling, something you have to pay for. Again, I don't know if that's even possible. I don't know anything about speed of satellites, but it seems like every year they're adding something. So next year, like I feel like the big one would be calling, right? Like, hey, I'm in freaking woods.
Yeah.
Don't forget to bring marshmallows. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. New Photos app looks I thought looked good. A lot of people I see online though are saying it looks confusing. Could this be a kind of a backlash kind of situation like the Safari browser from a few years ago?
Yeah, I don't know that it's confusing. It's just different. One thing that I do think is potentially worse is if you are a pretty heavy albums user, which most people aren't. I think that's why they did this change. But if you are, they've kind of pushed those to the bottom of the app in lieu of these smart albums and these memories, which is great because most people are lazy and they don't care and they don't want to do albums. But if you are someone who has done albums, those almost feel like an afterthought in the new app. And then there are just a couple small UI things that I think are weird and unintuitive. So like when you open up the app initially, half of it is your photos grid, right? And then the other half is those today, 5 years ago or whatever, those teasers that they want people to look at, which are great because they've been there for years, but people just don't know about them. So that's good. But one thing I've done, and it took me forever to figure it out, is you know how you can select multiple pictures by tapping the select button and then you just drag with your finger? That now only shows if the full grid of photos is there. And so you have to like scroll down to load the full grid for that. So for like a frustratingly long time, I was like tapping on it and I'm like, why can I not select multiple photos? These are all small UX things, and I'm sure they'll improve over the course of the beta. But there's just a couple weird things that I was like, I wouldn't do it that way. But for such a substantial change, I think it's pretty good.
About Apple Intelligence real quick.
AI?
This was obviously the main event of the show. They went through each OS. And Tim Cook even like loaded it up at the beginning, though. He was like, we're going to go through all our OSs, and then we'll talk to intelligence at the end. Apple Intelligence, AI, Apple's doing it a little differently than most. And I walked away feeling like for their first kind of swing at bat, I'm not a sports guy, so I don't even know if I'm saying this. It seemed like Apple knocked it out of the park in a way that other companies who have tried to do similar, Samsung with the latest Galaxies, Microsoft with the Copilot PCs, everyone was saying Apple is so behind, what are they going to do? And then they do all these announcements. And until they mentioned ChatGPT near the end, everything was their own in-house models that are doing all the stuff that we saw. I did not expect, and I was very impressed by.
They definitely kicked the touchdown, I think. Okay. With the updates.
They threw a field goal. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
So again, I want to throw back to John first. John, you're watching this?
Yes.
Apple Intelligence. They go through all these features across different devices and apps. Were you impressed? Were you underwhelmed? What were you feeling?
I've been pretty harsh on the Apple AI stuff. And despite the narrative, they did have a lot of AI things happen. They just weren't as forward or voice interactive type AI stuff. I thought what they did was awesome. And I didn't mind. I was excited about the ChatGPT end of it as well. I may be a minority on that. I think I'm sort of a realist on that front where I don't expect to have someone's privacy online at all. I think Apple does the best job historically of minimizing that, but Apple still has a history of also doing their own things with that data. I think it's awesome. We haven't seen it fully cooked yet. We've seen the ingriots. The cake looks like it's going to be very delicious. Hopefully what they said is what we get, and I have no reason to think otherwise. But I think we finally have a voice assistant, first of all, that can compete with what Google's doing. We have artificial intelligence that can compete with what Microsoft is doing. We have awareness of what's on the device, what's on the screen, which has long been overdue, which I think is, and that was one of the features I think was coming, was a 2025 thing. But integration even with their own apps was something that seemed very obvious and nice to see all of that come. I really think they checked pretty much all the boxes if they deliver what they said.
Yeah, I came away fairly impressed with it. There's a couple things that I think are impressive. One is that the majority of this is going to be done on device. We know that Apple's NPUs and neural engines have been in devices for a long time. They've been amazing for a long time. And the fact that that's going to happen without having to have any data sent to the cloud most of the time anyway is pretty cool. I also think that they did a pretty good job, although it was a little confusing. I think they were trying to explain, like, what is Apple Intelligence and what is it supposed to be and how does it work and then what will it do? And I think in the process of that, some of it was lost in translation because it kind of seems like they tried to throw everything at the wall. They're like, yeah, we know that some people use, proofreading and auto completion. We're going to do that. We know some people use AI for image generation, and we're going to do that too. But we also know that some people use it for, LLM based stuff, and that's where ChatGPT comes in. They'll help us with that when we don't know something. But also, and they're kind of trying to do all of the AI things, which I honestly didn't really expect them to do. The one that I'm the most interested in, but also the most cautiously optimistic for, because it's the one that nobody has really been able to figure out, is using, I refer to it as like an intent engine. That's not really a term, but this idea that these systems have all of our data, but how can we access that data easily? And how does the system know what we're referencing? I think if you look at something like, here's another sports analogy. Boy, did Microsoft fumble the Copilot PC feature where kind of like a rewind on the Mac, it just watches everything that you're doing. And then you can come back to this at any moment and be like, hey, remember that time when I was looking at this screen or this article? I don't really remember what exactly it said, but this was kind of the idea. And using LLMs, it can generate a bunch of different kind of outputs that will key string match. And you can go, okay, here's the page and here's what you do. Apple kind of is basically doing the same thing, but because they're not Microsoft, they know how to do it well enough that there's not hysteria about, security and all this stuff because it actually is secure. It's on device, but they're effectively also planning to, your phone's kind of been going to be watching everything that you're doing and observing all the incoming messages and PDFs so that when you ask it something, it can recall that. That's the type of AI feature that to me seems way more helpful than image generation. Is the demo that Craig gave of, I got an email about a meeting and I know that my daughter has a concert tonight. Is there a conflict? And the system goes and finds the PDF because he didn't put it in its calendar. It finds where the event is. It measures how long it's going to take in time and distance to go from where he's at now to the event via maps and traffic data. And then it relays a drafted reply to the person saying, yeah, we can switch the meeting, and a heads up to his daughter to say, hey, that's the kind of thing where I'm like, oh, that would be awesome. And that's what Humane and Rabbit and everybody else is trying to do. It's just nobody has really done that because it's really hard to understand intent and then know how to act. But it seems like Apple is also promising the same kind of thing everybody else is. And if there's anybody that I think might be able to figure it out, it's them, because the biggest complaint I had about the other devices, particularly the Humane, like it did an okay job. It's just that it didn't have any data because it's not my phone. Right. But Apple runs the OS that is on my phone, and my phone knows everything about me. And so the potential, possibilities are limitless, but I can also see them being very cautious about rolling those kind of features out because of what the implications could be. Last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up, is...
Are you worried about ChatGPT on that?
Not really. I'm actually kind of surprised they announced it at all, because I think that detracted from how impressive everything they've done themselves is. And they reiterated it in the keynote. They're like, everything we've talked about up until now, that's Apple Intelligence. But then you go on Twitter and everyone's like, nah, it's just ChatGPT, but it's rebranded on your phone. And I don't want them spying on me and whatever. And I'm kind of surprised because ChatGPT has such a great native app, and because, it's available on the Mac in a really excellent Swift app, I'm kind of surprised that they really integrated it at a deeper OS level at all, because from what I can tell, most of it is like, hey, look at my screen or take a screenshot and tell me, which you can kind of already do through the ChatGPT app on iOS. On the iPad anyway, you can broadcast your display like a FaceTime call to the ChatGPT app so it can see what you're looking at and add context. So that was kind of the thing where I'm like, it just seems messy to integrate that. And I felt like it kind of detracted from the messaging of, no, actually, most of this is really cool. It's all us. It's all on device. And when you do have to go somewhere else to servers, here's a server implementation we've developed that's different from everybody else. And this is why it's cool. So I don't know.
Just to be clear, in case people don't know, ChatGPT will ship turned off. So you have to specifically go in and enable it if you want it. And then every single time you want to use it, you have to confirm that you want to use it. So it's not like you turn it on once and then, I forgot I gave that app, access to my location 5 years ago or access to my whole contact list 5 years ago. And it's just every single time you want to use ChatGPT, you have to specifically say that you want to send your data there. So they're doing it in a way that makes it super obvious. And since it's ship turned off, like I get the hysteria that they were definitely flying through everything, so it could have been missed, but you can keep that turned off and use every other Apple Intelligence feature. Have a great time.
There was a lot, that was fueled by Elon, who I think has his own agenda. And I'm not making a joke because it's a real thing. I think has his own agenda. Has his own agenda with ChatGPT as a company.
Yes.
Anyway, but
Apple
then
didn't choose Grok.
Yeah.
And
but then saying that won't allow any Apple devices, in any of his companies. And I think that sort of spearheaded a discussion about it and kind of maybe change the narrative on what it would have been.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question for Elon. Okay. He's not here, but it's a question anyway. Apple devices integrating OpenAI software, we don't want those on campus anymore. They'll put them in Faraday cages when people come to work and when people are visiting. Okay, fine. We started this segment by talking about Microsoft's investment in OpenAI, correct? And we know Copilot PCs are a thing. So if you're not going to do development on Mac computers, you're not going to do development on what's happening with Tesla now?
Linux, baby.
Just Linux.
I mean, that's all about
pure Linux.
That's the only option. We're returning to Mr. Torvald.
And also, Samsung integrated Gemini. Like Gemini's cool. I don't even whatever. I used to think Elon was such a.
It's almost like he just tweets stuff without thinking about it.
I used to think he was so cool like 5 years ago.
He's like me, but not funny.
Genmoji looks completely useless, but so fun. Type in what you want. Like this is one of those Apple like delightful. People are gonna love this kind of feature.
What are you gonna use it for, Andrew?
Oh, I already typed this out. The first thing that occurred to me for some reason was I wanted someone that was like crying, sneezing, and throwing up at the same time. They were like, you can make that. You can make that. Because I was just trying to think of Apple is not going to let you do anything negative was what was in my head. And I was like, what if I want to make like, I'm stealing candy from the store or whatever. Like, are you going to put guardrails on that? They were like, no, you can
do anything. You can make that peach emoji, do whatever you want, man.
I really am super interested to see to what extent they do that. Because on the talk show, again, they were like, we spent a lot of time talking about what we should let these AI models do, right?
Yeah.
And the example they gave was like hot wiring a car. That's a factual thing that you can find out how to do, but in certain areas it's illegal, in certain areas it's immoral. And John Giandrea from Apple, who's kind of heading the whole operation with Craig, they're like, we kind of had some principles that we outlined years ago when we were starting this. And one of them was that ultimately we were going to let the users have agency within reason. And so they almost made it seem like you might be able to do more than you. So will I be able to say, in the Genmoji generator, say yellow smiley emoji, little square mustache? I don't know. That's like, I'm serious. I think there's going to be some things that like, I will be shocked if nobody can get anything controversial or something to come out of it, because that's just how these things work.
Yeah. They seem to not shy away from the controversy. There's also the image playground, which
that one even more maybe.
I felt super underwhelmed by, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
So we have,
I don't know why they did it.
We have illustration, we have sketch, and we have animation. There's these three styles of images you can make.
Yeah.
But it all kind of felt like, I don't know, DALL-E 1-ish to me. Like it feels like, hey, just generate your own clip art.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want clip art. Now I understand Apple is not a company that would probably want to jump in, at least at first, with photorealistic image generation like you can get with like Mint.
Yeah.
I totally get that. But this feels like one of those features, at least to me, that I'll try it a couple times and probably just forget about it forever.
Yeah.
And until it can do more impressive things. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. Because like we're talking about the company that made Animoji or Memojis that all kind of look the same. They all got the same head shape, and like my Memoji doesn't look anything like me, but like that's the closest I could get. And in theory, this will allow us to get closer. But again, you've got to be careful such that it doesn't get too realistic, or you can make things that are, naughty happen or whatever. It'll be fascinating to see how underwhelming it is, and or the blowback from it being more capable than we think and people doing bad stuff with it. Yeah. So
I think it's going to go the way of like a slow fee and double tap on the Apple Watch. I'm going to forget that they exist.
A slow fee. Forgot about that.
Probably pretty quickly. I literally just remember I could double tap on my watch like this week. I'm like, I just did. They totally did it by accident.
Yeah,
they're doing more stuff with that in WatchOS 11 that developers will be access. But we don't got to talk about that, John. We don't got to talk about WatchOS 11. We have a while before we get to public beta, so let's switch gears.
All right,
literally as you said, and talk some of these EVs. Quinn and I got to try out the new Rivians. Quinn also bought a Cybertruck.
There's
a lot to talk about here.
Let's talk Cybertruck first. First, I want to know why.
I owe it to the viewer. I owe it to the viewer. That really is the answer. I wanted to review one. I don't feel like you can review a car unless you kind of own it, because that's like, it hurts. And the things that, might bug you in a review sample, but you're like, whatever. Like when it's your car, you're like, no, this actually sucks. This bothers me or whatever. And so you have to be more careful with it because you can't give it back with a bunch of dents and stuff that people do with loaners all the time. So yeah, that was one reason. And then I just kind of wanted to see where Tesla was at relative to the rest of the EV trucks are on the market. And in some ways, they've done really impressive stuff. In some ways, I'm like, holy smokes, how did you guys think this was okay? So anyway.
What's your plans with Cybertruck? Are you going to keep it?
I don't see myself keeping it, no. I bought it thinking maybe I will, and maybe I'll really like it. And there are aspects that I like, but I get back in my Rivian and I'm like, yeah, this is the car for me. This is a better car. And it doesn't do, as many of the same things. It has some tech that's older by comparison. The Cybertruck, from an engineering standpoint, is a masterpiece. I mean, the steer-by-wire is amazing. The 48-volt system, incredible.
It drives incredibly well.
Yeah, but you sit in, just like being inside of it and it being a car and it matching the kind of vibe that I'm going for, the Rivian is much closer to what I'm kind of liking. And from off-road stuff, we go off-roading a lot, and the Cybertruck is just too damn long. The wheelbase is a no-go. So yeah.
When I was test driving the Rivian, I said, I was like, I get the off-roading aspect and it's super fun, but I imagine most people who spend $80,000 to $100,000 on a vehicle, they don't even want to get a scratch on it, let alone.
I don't think that's true with Rivians.
Ooh, I've got trail rash all down the side of mine. I have paint missing. Yeah. I got some deep scratches in mine. Yeah.
You treat yours like leather, like you like that patina on your vehicle.
I'll find some guy in a few years when I'm ready to sell it that'll go, you know what? I appreciate that. You did cool things with this. I don't know.
I do think Rivian vastly, like, they came out with their trucks and SUV aimed at adventure folks. I think that was like who they marketed to. I think they really ended up being like carpools. It's like really ended up being where you see most of the where you see most of them. But my wife and I have driven an R1T. My wife drives an R1S Gen 1. How does Gen 2 compare? And did you guys drive the quad motor or see the quad motor?
Drove the quad motor on the drag strip.
We did the drag strip. Yeah.
How does the quad compare to like a launch edition? It's putting Andrew, you had one.
You want to go, Andrew?
Well, I can't compare it. So my Rivian Gen 2 experience was my first time ever driving any Rivian. So I can't do any comparisons to.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So Gen 1 to Gen 2 is a really big jump, but not really on the surface. If you look at the totality of stuff that's new, there's not that much new. And especially some of the things that were not going to be available, that there was a bunch of blowback from upon release, that's now being added. So like the blind spot monitoring when you put your turn signal on, that's coming. LEDs in the cabin that can change colors, even though they say the gamut is limited on those LED diodes, those will come again too. Those are small things.
Sure.
I think the biggest thing, the singular biggest thing, there are two. One was the ride quality was substantially better. Now on the R1T, it was a little better, but not that much better. You know that the truck is already quite good and feels quite planted.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit more, the dampening is a little bit more controlled. So you don't get as much kind of like body roll and that jostly kind of pavement stuff. But the R1S, and that's what I drive, is bad. Like it doesn't drive like a super expensive car. And you compare it to, a Range Rover or a Lexus GX or kind of cars in the similar price range, and it's not as good. You had the front that was like super heavily sprung, and so it was very rough on roads. And then the back is super floaty and waffly and bouncy. It has huge amounts of understeer. And they've done a surprising amount of stuff via software to make it better. But in the same vein that the Model Y has always felt like a worse Model 3 to me, because it's built on the Model 3 platform, and that was what it was supposed to be. It was kind of like a, yeah, me too. So too did the R1S feel kind of like an afterthought relative to the R1T. Now, they both feel like bespoke built cars with a singular purpose. I think the ride quality on the R1S is fantastic. It's incredibly smooth. It's very quiet. And then the other problems I have with Gen 1 is just general cabin ceiling. Like I get some road noise and tire noise.
Absolutely.
And the sound deadening on the Gen 2 is way better. It feels like you're in a $100,000 car, which I don't feel like the R1 really does.
We had to bring both of our R1s in for like sound dampening and sealing and that kind of stuff. Would you say it's a worthwhile upgrade from a Gen 1 R1T to a Gen 2 R1T, or a Gen 1 R1S to a Gen 2 R1S?
How rich are you? That's a joke, but that's really kind of the answer.
Yeah.
I will not be upgrading because I think the residual values on the Gen 1 cars are going to be pretty rough. And then I got my R1S for $74,000. And so, you know, they've been selling the R1 for $100 plus for the last year, but not that many people have actually been buying it $100 plus because they're still honoring that $30,000 lower starting price point. And so when I look at my R1 as a $70,000 to $75,000 car, which is still obviously very expensive, but that's the price that it was, I'm like, yeah, okay. And I look at the new R2 and I'm like, okay, this does feel like a $100,000 car, but I can't justify owning a $100,000 car. So as much as I want one, I will not be buying one.
I mean, that's Cybertruck's not a inexpensive automobile.
That's true, and that's why I'm selling it. I didn't love it enough to be like, okay, So, yeah, I think anyone who were to upgrade would be very happy with the R2. But
the R1,
blame anyone.
R1 Gen 2.
Oh, yeah, excuse me, R1 Gen 2. Yep.
I didn't ask you guys this. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Both, because both of you own both vehicles, right?
I no longer have a truck, but I've owned both of them.
But you have in the past, and you do as well, John. How do you compare the two? Like, I look at both. One costs about $5,000 less than the other, but they seem, aside from the bed, they seem like almost the same car.
I mean, I can describe it as somebody who, especially from my wife's perspective, who drives my truck and hers, not a car person, carries a lot of kids and a lot of stuff. The R1S drives better. It's a smaller car. It turns better. According to her, she prefers driving the R1S. I love my truck. I love it. There's something about it. That's why I haven't gotten a new car. There's something about it that I just, even like the little quirks about it. I mean, I love taking my kids to baseball and them sitting on the gear tilt door, putting on their cleats. I love throwing their bags inside of there. I just powered their whole birthday party from the outlet in my truck. Like, there's just something about it that I love that's not important to her. I think if you're carrying more people, the R1S is incredible. It's probably if the budget is sort of affordable to you, probably one of the most perfect cars for moving things. I think the truck is like, I just there's something about it I just love.
I would agree. I think the R1T is so intentional and purposeful and whimsical. And again, because that was the first one that they designed, they had to make it different from everything else. So the gear tunnel and the storage underneath the bed and the lift gate, the front trunk being super capacious is super nice. Even small things like the R1T, and I don't know if you've noticed this, John, but like the rear seats, they're almost like stadium seating. So people don't get car sick in an R1T because you're actually looking over top of the driver and front passenger. Whereas the R1S rides more like a regular SUV. I don't think the seats are quite as comfortable in the R1S. They're incredibly hard to fold down and put back up for even weaker adults, much less kids. Yeah. And I can't believe that's something that they didn't change for the R2. An engineer alluded to me that the reason would have been that they needed recertification and crash testing done. But I was like, because you can't change the seats. But I was like, that's the worst thing. And that's the single thing that I said when I originally reviewed this was like, At $70,000, it's already offensive. At $100,000, the third row seats, you have to manually climb in to lower and raise them with a latch, which is bananas. And then the second row, you can collapse, but you can't put up automatically. And they are so heavily sprung that, forget kids, like weaker, less strong individuals. I mean, I'm not brawny by any measure, but I can lift stuff. And even in my car, I'm like, oh man, these are so heavy. Every time I'm like shocked. It's like probably a 35-pound seat, honestly.
It's a pain. And if you want to get into the third row and you have to move the seat, it folds forward fine, but it doesn't go right back to where it was.
Yeah. You can slide it back, and then you've got to readjust the seat back. Yeah, it's bad.
I was like, it's bad. And no captain shares was something I think we were hoping for as a family of 5 for the R1S. But Andru, as somebody who never driven a Rivian, and your first experience, I imagine a lot of people's will be this new second-gen platform. What did you think? Was it enough to convince you, and you're a Tesla guy, to convince you to try something different?
Yeah, I've owned a Model 3 long range. I've owned a Model 3 Performance, and I have 2 Model Y Performance. And I got in the Rivian. I've driven other EVs as well. I have a Chevy Blazer EV out here. I do a lot of testing of different vehicles. When I got into the Rivian, my first time getting into a Rivian, just sitting in there, I was just like, it almost took my breath away how beautiful it was. Seats, the floor, the wheels, the outside, but like the wood. I always think of wood as like those old school station wagons, which doesn't look good to me. So I was like, oh, that's not gonna look.
The woodies.
You know. But I went in, there was like that white, I forget what it was called, like birch wood or something like that, and I was just like, this is incredible. And then you drive, and I think what impressed me most was when we were off-roading. I've done off-roading on some other vehicle, car trips as well. The suspension or whatever it was, I felt like I was just on a ride at Disneyland. Like it was just kind of, well, I didn't feel like it was just rough and rugged. I know it can do all these rugged things, but on the inside of the cab, it just felt like it was just doing all the work for me. And I was just kind of guiding it along. I was so impressed. I'm impressed enough that I immediately started trying to get a lease. The one that I want is the tri-motor. And apparently you have to since it's not out yet, you have to put your deposit down of $3,000 and then they'll tell you later how much you're leasing. I was like, I don't want to, that's weird. I want to know what the price will be now. I don't want to pay $3,000 and then find out later. So I'm waiting for that to be released, but I'm very interested.
Truck or SUV?
I was leaning towards truck because from my vantage point, once you get into the driver's seat, you can't, at least I couldn't tell which one I was in. Like visually, it's like they looked so similar.
Yep.
You're saving roughly $5,000, but also just the utility. I've never been a truck guy. I've never had the utility of a truck, but this vehicle was the first one that made me like, oh, I want a truck. I want to have a truck now.
There's 2 other small perks to the truck.
Yeah.
Cabin noise and isolation will be better because it's just a more unibody structure. And then the sound system is better in the truck.
Oh, really?
There's less kind of air that you've got to move around. And it's also more efficient to heat the cabin because it's smaller for the same battery pack. The truck is awesome. And you will love it. By the way, get ready for the price because I have heard from birds that the tri-motor is going to start at around 105. So it's not going to be cheap.
And they're putting the quad upwards of 115.
Yeah, maybe more. 125 is kind of what I heard. Cool. So very pricey.
What do you guys have now?
What was that?
Like, as far as configuration?
I had the launch edition, which is quad motor on both of ours. But it was grandfathered in the older pricing that Quinn's was.
Okay.
Yeah, quad motor, same pack size. Now the motors are completely different. The new ones are all in-house. Ours are Bosch motors.
Yeah.
The dual motor drive unit they have is amazing now. There's a bunch of small changes that John might recognize that are like super, super neat. Like one thing, and this is just again, like drivetrain has gotten so good from Rivian. The Bosches have a mechanical disconnect at the back, which is a good idea because if you're carrying around all this weight, once you get up to speed, if you can disconnect a physical linkage to your half shafts in the rear, you can make the car front wheel drive. When you're already at speed, it's easy to maintain speed and you can, save quite a bit of energy just being in front wheel drive. The problem with the Bosch units that we have is that there's incredible amounts of tire wear that come from that because you're constantly pulling on the front, which is more expensive than the small amount of energy you'll save. And then you lose the power of the vehicle. It's just totally gutless because you're at half power. It's only 450 horsepower instead of 900. And the new motors, they still have that mechanical disconnect, but they can now do it on the fly and it works independent of drive modes. So if you're in conserve mode, it will still disconnect when you want to save energy, but as soon as you put the pedal down to the floor, it reconnects them instantly and gives you full torque to pass. That also means that when you're stopped and you start going, you're not in front wheel drive, so you don't get the same amount of tire wear. It's just all these small little refinements that are money. And then the interior, to echo Andrew, is beautiful. I mean, John knows the trucks are nice as is, but like that middle part where you put your luggage like under the center console, that's hard plastic. That's wrap stitched leather on the new one. Every surface, there's not a single surface in the car that's soft touch or hard touch. It's all wrap stitched leather, and it's like
they do such a nice job. It's nice about conservative. I almost never use it because I was worried about tire wear.
Yeah,
I think what was exciting about Rivian, at least for me originally, was like nothing about those cars felt like the first cars from the new company. And I've driven a lot. The Model S, for all intents and purposes, was Tesla's first fully built car. I had the Lucid Air, their first fully built car. It was very impressive. I think the question that I always get from people is, I love the cars. I'm ready for an R2. Like, is Rivian going to survive? Like,
that's a good question. Yeah.
Which is probably, I think, the big sticking point for a lot of people.
If Andrew doesn't buy the tri-motor, maybe they won't be.
I think, RJ, the CEO, is claimed to be gross margin positive by the end of the year, and is still standing pat on that. Yeah. The last quarterly earnings that we heard, they were still losing, I believe, is upwards of $30,000 per vehicle, which sounds huge. But a year ago, they were losing $60,000. They were using $60,000 per vehicle. So this new platform, I guess, new contracts they negotiated, brings that cost down. I think if they can get to R2 production, and if R2 is even like close to profitable, I think that company they're going to be here for the long haul.
Oh yeah, they'll survive.
Personally.
Yeah. No, they literally, if they can get the first R2 off the line, they're fine. It's just if they can get there.
But they have to get it out though for some sort of profitable, or at least have a path to profitability.
That's fair. Yeah. No, and I you look at all the stuff that they did on the new vehicle, from the harnesses and the wiring. They moved the number of ECUs from 17 to 7,
which is
super localized. Crazy. They removed 1.5 miles of wiring. They say they saved hours of time on the production line, which is obviously the biggest expense. It makes repairs easier because like now the BMS for the batteries on the bottom instead of having to drop the pack. Like, they've been making these cars and they know now what the sticking points are that they didn't really know a few years ago. And I think, again, you're right. If they can get gross margin positive, then they're going to be sitting pretty okay. And I don't think that if they can get there, I think they are going to need more money, which is, by the way, why I think they played their hand early with the R3 and the R3X, is they want to be like, see, we've got more stuff in the pipeline, and look, and I think they can come back to the R1 and say, look, we've cut the production costs off of these vehicles by $30,000-$40,000 while raising the price of them $10,000 to $15,000, and we're still able to sell them. It's going to be looking pretty good for them, but that's easier said than done, and that's kind of where I think they're maybe smart is at $70,000 to $90,000, which is where they were. They were kind of in no man's land. There's not really cars in that price range. You're really kind of up to about 70, and then there's a hole until you're over 100. And so being in the new R1 Gen 2 was, to me anyways, like this is an attack on the Range Rover and on the G-Wagon and on that class of vehicles, not on the Model Y or the Model X or anything like that. And my suspicion is that when R2 hits production, that they're just going to kill the dual motor R1, and that's going to be the ultra luxury $100,000 plus model that they just don't sell that many of.
I'm excited. I believe in Rivian. I love the cars. I think they got a really bright future. I think they're led by very sharp individual.
Agree.
Who looks like a Clark Kent Steve-O. If you haven't seen what RJ's series is like.
Handsome lad.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Quinn, it's weird that they're based in Irvine. It's like I see these like mules driving around all the time. It's weird that they're local. Quinn, thank you, my friend. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for talking. And always thanks for the opinions.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
And that is it for this edition of Geared Up. Thank you so much for listening. Of course, you can catch John and I on YouTube. I'm at youtube.com/gearlive, and John is at youtube.com/John4Lakers. Feel free to head over and subscribe to our channels to stay up to date on all the latest tech. Speaking of subscribing, you can subscribe to Geared Up in your favorite podcast app if you haven't done so already. Just search Geared Up, that's 2 words, not one, in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, Overcast, or really wherever you choose to listen. If you like what we do, please consider leaving us a rating and review. It really helps other people find the show. Geared Up is a Gear Live podcast, and you can see more from us at gearlive.com. Thank you so much for listening. For John Rettinger, I'm Andrew Edwards, and we'll catch you in the next episode.